The morning sun filtered through the dusty windshield as Karim turned the key in the ignition. His yellow taxi hummed to life, the familiar vibration beneath him somehow comforting after 15 years behind the wheel. He glanced at the small photo tucked beside his meter, his daughter Layla in her high school graduation cap, beaming with promise. Next year would be university, and the thought of tuition fees made his stomach tighten. One day at a time, he whispered to himself, pulling away from the curb and into the flow of early traffic. Tuesday mornings were usually quiet. The weekend tourists had left, and the business crowd tended to use rideshare apps these days. Still, Karim took pride in his work. He'd wiped down the seats before starting his shift, made sure the floor mats were clean, and even placed a small vase with a fresh daisy on the dashboard, a touch his regular customers had come to expect. The city was waking up around him. Street vendors arranged colorful fruits at their stalls. Shopkeepers raised their security gates with metallic rattles, and office workers hurried along clutching coffee cups like lifelines. Karim drove slowly through the familiar streets, his eyes scanning for raised hands or nodding heads, the universal signals for someone needing a ride. His radio crackled. "Anyone near West Side? Got a pickup at the Grand Hotel." Karim reached for the handset. "I'm 3 blocks away. I'll take it." The Grand Hotel stood tall against the morning sky, its revolving doors constantly in motion. A doorman in a crisp uniform nodded as Karim pulled up. Moments later, a businessman in a charcoal suit slid into the back seat. "Airport, please. Terminal B," the man said without looking up from his phone. Karim nodded, merging back into traffic. "Morning rush or heading out early?" The man glanced up, seemingly surprised by the conversation attempt. "Early meeting in Chicago. Need to catch the 9:30. You'll make it with time to spare," Karim assured him, taking a quick right turn to avoid construction ahead. "I know a shortcut past the bridge construction." Something in Karim's voice must have sounded genuine, because the businessman finally put his phone down. "Been driving long?" 15 years next month, Karim replied, pride warming his voice. "Same city, same streets, but never the same day twice." The man nodded thoughtfully. "My father drove a cab for 30 years back home. Always said he learned more about human nature behind that wheel than any philosopher with a fancy degree." Karim laughed. "Your father was a wise man. I've had millionaires who couldn't spare a dollar tip, and homeless folks who insisted I take their last 5 because I helped with their groceries." The traffic light turned red, and Karim stopped, drumming his fingers lightly on the wheel. Outside, a street musician played a mournful tune on his saxophone, the notes floating through Karim's partially opened window. "Beautiful song," the businessman remarked. "It's an old folk melody from back home," Karim explained. "My grandmother used to hum it while making bread." The light changed, and Karim navigated around a delivery truck double-parked ahead. The conversation shifted to families, and by the time they reached the airport, the businessman had shown Karim photos of his twin daughters and heard about Layla's scholarship applications. "What's she want to study?" the man asked as Karim unloaded his suitcase. "Medicine," Karim answered, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "She volunteers at the Children's Hospital every weekend. Noble profession." The man handed over a credit card, then added a generous tip on the screen. "For Layla's textbooks," he said with a wink before disappearing through the sliding doors. Karim sat for a moment in the departure lane, a smile lingering on his face. These were the moments that made the job worthwhile, these brief but genuine human connections. By midday, Karim had completed 8 more rides, an elderly couple heading to their doctor's appointment, a frazzled mother with twins who had forgotten their lunchboxes at home, a group of tourists needing directions as much as transportation, and a quiet young woman who spent the entire ride staring out the window, clearly lost in thought. He stopped for lunch at his regular spot, a small food cart run by Jin, who made the best falafel wraps in the city. "The usual?" Jin asked, already reaching for the fresh pita bread. Karim nodded, leaning against the cart. "Busy morning?" "Always busy, my friend. But busy is good." Jin worked with practiced efficiency, his hands a blur as he assembled the wrap. "How's the road today?" "Smooth enough. That new pothole on 5th is getting worse, though." Jin laughed. "I swear that hole is big enough to swallow my cart now. My brother-in-law cracked his rim there last week." They chatted about neighborhood gossip while Jin prepared the food, a new coffee shop opening on the corner, the rising cost of parking permits, Jin's daughter winning a science competition at school. This daily ritual grounded Karim, connected him to the city in ways beyond just driving its streets. Wrap in hand, Karim walked back to his taxi and ate in the driver's seat, watching people pass by. A young couple holding hands, an off-duty firefighter walking his dog, two old men playing chess at a park table. Each with their own story, their own destination. Sometimes Karim made up stories about them in his head, harmless little fantasies about where they might be going or coming from. His phone buzzed, a text from his wife Fatima. "Don't forget to pick up milk." "Layla staying late at library. Love you." He smiled, typing back a quick response before finishing his lunch. The simple reminder of family waiting at home recharged him for the afternoon shift. The early afternoon passed with steady work. A teacher needing a ride after her car wouldn't start. A nervous young man practicing his marriage proposal in the back seat. "Should I mention our first date?" he'd asked, and Karim had assured him that personal touches always worked best. An accountant who'd fallen asleep before they'd gone 5 blocks. Karim had driven extra carefully over the bumps, remembering his own exhaustion during tax season years ago when he'd worked in an office. By 4 o'clock, the sky had darkened with gathering rain clouds. Karim switched on his headlights and turned the wipers to intermittent as the first drop speckled his windshield. Rain always meant more business, people reluctant to walk even short distances, but also more traffic as everyone slowed down. He'd just dropped off a passenger at the train station when he noticed his gas gauge dipping toward empty. Better to fill up now than risk running low during rush hour. He pulled into a service station, joining the line of vehicles seeking fuel before the downpour really began. While waiting, he checked his earnings for the day. Not bad, but not great either. If the evening went well, he might have enough extra to put toward the laptop Layla needed for university. The old family computer at home was wheezing its last breaths, and her applications would need something more reliable. The rain picked up as he pumped gas, fat drops soaking his jacket despite the overhead canopy. Inside the station, he bought himself a cup of hot tea, cupping it between his hands to warm them as he returned to the taxi. Rush hour was building now, the streets filling with cars as offices began to empty. Wipers slapping at maximum speed, Karim navigated the slick roads with the confidence of long experience. The radio dispatched him to a law firm, where 3 junior associates squeezed into his back seat, all heading to the same neighborhood. They spent the ride complaining about their boss, occasionally remembering to apologize to Karim for the shop talk. He just smiled and assured them he'd heard it all before. Their animated conversation, punctuated with inside jokes and shared frustrations, reminded him of his own early working days before the taxi, when he'd been part of a close-knit shipping company staff. After dropping them off, he picked up an older man from a pharmacy. The gentleman struggled with several medication bags, and Karim helped him arrange them safely before carefully assisting him into the car. "Nasty day to be out," Karim commented, adjusting the heater for his passenger's comfort. "When you get to my age, young man, every day above ground is a good day, rain or shine," the passenger replied with a wry smile, his voice carrying the slight tremor of advanced years. The old man directed Karim to a modest apartment building and insisted on telling him about each of his grandchildren during the 15-minute drive, 7 in total, each one apparently more brilliant than the last. Karim listened patiently, asking questions in all the right places. When they arrived, he insisted on holding his umbrella over the man while helping him to the door, medication bag secure in his other hand. Back in the taxi, now well into the evening rush, Karim checked his watch. A few more hours, then home to Fatima's cooking, and Layla's excited chatter about whatever new medical fact she'd learned that day. The thought warmed him more than the car's struggling heater ever could. The rain was coming down in sheets now, the streets growing emptier as people sought shelter. Karim drove slowly past the children's hospital, its windows glowing with fluorescent light against the darkening sky. Something made him pause, pulling over to the curb for a moment. He often drove patients from this hospital, had even taken Layla there for her volunteer shifts. Something about the place always made him reflect on life's fragility, on how quickly ordinary days could become extraordinary challenges. Little did Karim know that in less than an hour, His ordinary Tuesday would take a turn that would change several lives forever. But for now, he simply watched the hospital through the curtain of rain, said a small prayer for those inside, and pulled back into traffic, ready for whatever passenger might need him next. The rain had eased to a gentle drizzle by late afternoon, but dark clouds still hung low over the city. Kareem had just dropped off an elderly couple at their apartment building and was driving past the children's hospital again when movement caught his eye. A young woman was standing under the hospital's covered entrance, one arm frantically waving at passing cars while the other cradled a small boy wrapped in a blue blanket. Something in her desperate gestures made Kareem pull over immediately, wipers still clearing the last raindrops from his windshield. He rolled down his window. Need a ride? Relief washed over her face. Yes, please. Thank you for stopping. Kareem jumped out quickly, opening the rear door. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into the woman's face. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her hair pulled back messily as if she hadn't had time to think about her appearance for days. The boy in her arms looked about 6, his face unnaturally pale against the bright blue of the blanket. Let me help you, Kareem offered, carefully supporting the boy's legs as the woman slid into the back seat with her son still cradled against her chest. He's not contagious, she said quickly, misreading Kareem's concerned glance. He's just very tired from his treatment. Kareem nodded, closing their door gently before returning to the driver's seat. Where to? She gave an address that Kareem recognized as being in one of the older apartment complexes across town, about a 20-minute drive in the current traffic. As he pulled away from the curb, he adjusted his rearview mirror slightly, keeping an eye on his passengers. The boy's eyes were closed, his breathing even but shallow. His mother stroked his hair absently, staring out the window at the passing city. In the mirror, Kareem noticed a tear slide down her cheek, which she quickly wiped away when she caught his glance. Is there a faster route? She asked softly. He gets uncomfortable sitting too long after his treatments. I'll do my best, Kareem promised, taking the next right to avoid the construction that had started earlier that day. There's water in the pocket behind my seat if either of you need it. Thank you. Her voice was barely above a whisper. They drove in silence for several blocks. The city blurred around them, people hurrying home from work, shops beginning to turn on their evening lights, a street cleaner slowly making its way along the curb. Ordinary life continuing while inside the taxi, Kareem could feel the weight of something extraordinary. At a red light, the boy stirred, whimpering slightly. Shh, Ali, we're almost home, his mother soothed, pulling the blanket more snugly around him. Just a little longer. Is he in pain? Kareem asked gently, meeting her eyes in the mirror. She hesitated. The medicine helps, but the trip always tires him out. She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The doctors say he's doing better than expected, though. Kareem nodded, wanting to offer comfort, but unsure how. That's good news. The light changed, and Kareem accelerated smoothly, taking extra care to avoid potholes and bumps that might jostle his passengers. He found himself driving the way he did when Layla had been carsick as a child, with deliberate gentleness, anticipating every turn. I have a daughter, he said, after another moment of silence. She volunteers at the children's hospital on weekends. Maybe she's met your son? The woman looked up with faint interest. What's her name? Layla, she wants to be a doctor someday. The volunteers are wonderful there, she replied. They brought Ali a birthday cake last month when we were stuck in the hospital during his birthday. Made him feel special. Her voice caught slightly on the last word. Through the mirror, Kareem saw another tear escape, followed by another. She turned her face toward the window, clearly trying to hide her emotion, but her shoulders shook slightly with suppressed sobs. Kareem pretended not to notice, giving her privacy while navigating through a busy intersection. He turned on the radio to a soft music station, keeping the volume low, offering sound to fill the silence and cover her quiet crying. The boy, Ali, slept on, his small chest rising and falling beneath the blanket. Something about his peaceful face made Kareem's heart ache. He thought of Layla at that age, how vulnerable she had seemed, how fiercely he had wanted to protect her from every hardship. They were nearing the apartment complex now, the buildings showing their age but maintained with evident care. Small gardens decorated some of the ground floor windows, and children's bicycles were chained to several of the railings. Which building? Kareem asked as he turned into the complex. The far one with the green door, she replied, her voice steadier now though her eyes remained red. Kareem pulled up as close as possible to the entrance. Let me help you inside. She began to protest but stopped when Ali stirred again. Actually, thank you. Our apartment is on the second floor. Leaving the meter running, Kareem came around to open their door. He offered to carry Ali, but the woman shook her head. He gets frightened when he wakes up with strangers, she explained. But if you could take these... She gestured to a small bag of medications and a folder of papers beside her on the seat. Kareem gathered these items and followed her to the building's entrance, holding the door as she maneuvered through with her precious cargo. The stairwell was clean but dimly lit, with scuffed walls that had seen decades of residents come and go. She climbed slowly, pausing on the landing to adjust Ali in her arms. Kareem waited patiently, noting how she winced slightly with the effort. She herself looked in need of rest. At her apartment door, she shifted Ali again, trying to reach into her pocket for keys. Let me hold him just for a moment, Kareem offered again. This time she relented, carefully transferring the sleeping boy to Kareem's arms. Ali was lighter than expected, his body warm through the blanket. He stirred briefly, eyes fluttering open to reveal dark irises clouded with fatigue, before drifting closed again. The woman unlocked the door and took Ali back immediately, the protective instinct of a mother evident in every movement. Kareem followed her inside just long enough to set the medication bag and folder on a small table by the entrance. The apartment was modest, but immaculately kept. A collection of framed drawings, clearly Ali's work, decorated one wall. Schoolbooks were neatly stacked on a small desk, and a worn but clean sofa had been prepared with pillows and a folded quilt, clearly where Ali would rest. Thank you, she said, laying Ali gently on the sofa and tucking the quilt around him. How much do I owe you for the ride? Kareem glanced at the bills she was already pulling from a small purse, noticing how she counted them carefully, lips moving silently as if each dollar held significant weight. He remembered the folder of medical papers, the bags of medication, the weariness in her every movement. Don't worry about it, he said suddenly. No charge today. She looked up, confusion crossing her face. I can pay. I just need to. Her voice trailed off as she continued counting the worn bills. Kareem shook his head firmly. It's taken care of. Think of it as a favor, one parent to another. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I can't accept that. You worked. You should be paid. Despite her protest, the relief in her voice was unmistakable. Next time, Kareem said with a gentle smile, focus on getting him better. That's payment enough. She looked at him for a long moment, a complex mixture of gratitude and something like pride crossing her features. At least take my contact information so I can pay you when things are... She gestured vaguely, not finishing her thought. Kareem, already backing toward the door, shook his head again. It's really fine. I hope he feels better soon. Before she could protest further, Kareem stepped out, closing the door softly behind him. In the hallway, he took a deep breath, feeling an unexpected tightness in his chest. He hadn't planned to refuse payment. Taxi driving was his livelihood, after all. And money was always tight. But something about the situation had demanded that response. As he descended the stairs, he realized he hadn't even asked her name. No matter, the city was large and the chance of crossing paths again was slim. Still, he found himself hoping that Ali would recover, that the mother's burden would ease somehow. Back in his taxi, Kareem switched off the meter that had been running throughout their stop. $22.50 that he wouldn't see. He glanced at his earnings for the day and calculated the loss. One less dinner out this month, perhaps, or postponing that new pair of shoes he needed. Worth it, he decided, pulling away from the curb. Some things couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. As Kareem merged back into traffic, the city lights were coming on in earnest now, creating shimmering reflections on the still wet streets. He'd need to work a bit later tonight to make up for the lost fare, but that was fine. Fatima would understand when he told her the story. He switched his taxi light back on, ready for the next passenger, unaware that the simple act of kindness he'd just performed would circle back to him in ways he couldn't imagine. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of cooking when Kareem finally arrived home. He slipped off his shoes at the door, hanging his jacket on the hook where it dripped quietly onto the mat below. Through the narrow hallway he could hear the clink of dishes and the soft hum of his wife's voice as she sang to herself, a habit she'd had for the 23 years they'd been married. "Is that you?" Fatima called out. "Dinner's almost ready." "It's me," Karim replied, padding into the kitchen in his sock feet. The familiar sight of his wife stirring a pot on the stove, her hair tucked loosely behind her ears, brought the first real smile to his face since he'd left the young mother and her son. Fatima turned to give him a quick kiss on the cheek, then glanced at the clock on the wall. "You're later than usual." "Busy day?" Karim shrugged, moving to wash his hands at the sink. "Average, I suppose." "Where's Layla?" "Still at the library. Called to say she's having dinner with her study group." Fatima gave the pot a final stir and switched off the burner, which means it's just us tonight. "Help me set the table?" They moved around each other with the easy rhythm of long-married couples, Karim fetching plates while Fatima filled water glasses. Within minutes, they were seated across from each other, steam rising from bowls of fragrant stew. "You're quiet tonight," Fatima observed after a few moments of silence. "Something on your mind?" Karim looked up from his food, which he'd been pushing around more than eating. "I gave a free ride today." Fatima raised an eyebrow. "That's not like you. What happened?" "A mother and her sick son," Karim said, the image of them still clear in his mind. "From the children's hospital. The boy, Ali was his name, couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. So pale, Fatima, and thin. The kind of thin that comes from being ill, not just from being small." Fatima nodded, her expression softening. "Cancer?" She didn't say exactly. But there were medications, and he'd just had some kind of treatment. Karim took a sip of water, remembering. "She tried to hide it, but she was crying in the back seat. Quietly, thinking I wouldn't notice." "Poor woman," Fatima murmured. "Was she alone?" "No husband?" Karim shook his head. "I didn't ask. But there was no one else at the hospital with them, and no one waiting at their apartment." He described the ride, the careful way the mother had held her son, the apartment with its wall of children's drawings. As he spoke, the experience seemed to take on new dimensions. Details he hadn't fully processed at the time now stood out in sharp relief. "When she went to pay me," he continued, "I could see her counting the bills so carefully, like each one mattered, and suddenly I just couldn't take her money." Fatima reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Of course you couldn't. You did exactly what I would expect from the man I married." Something in her simple acceptance loosened a knot Karim hadn't realized was tightening in his chest. "It was $22.50, he admitted. "Not a small amount for us either." "We'll manage," Fatima said firmly. "We always do." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the soft tick of the kitchen clock and the occasional clink of spoons against bowls the only sounds. Outside, a car horn honked once, followed by the distant wail of an ambulance. City noises that normally faded into the background, but tonight made Karim think of the mother and son again. "What's bothering you isn't the money," Fatima observed, always perceptive after so many years together. Karim set down his spoon. "I left so quickly. Didn't even get her name or give her my card. What if the boy needed another ride to the hospital? What if she needed help again?" He ran a hand over his face. "I was trying to make it easier for her to accept, but now I'm thinking maybe I just made it harder for her to find help next time." Fatima considered this, her head tilted slightly. "Maybe. Or maybe you gave her exactly what she needed most in that moment. Not just a free ride, but the chance to accept kindness without strings or obligations. Sometimes that's a gift too." "Perhaps," Karim said, not entirely convinced. "I just keep seeing that boy's face. He reminded me of Sammy." At the mention of their nephew who had battled leukemia as a child, Fatima's eyes grew distant. "Sammy was lucky. He had your sister and her husband, plus both sets of grandparents and us." She paused. "If this mother is alone..." She didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew how hard it had been for Karim's sister, even with a strong support network. The endless hospital visits, the fear that lived like an unwelcome guest in every corner of their lives, the financial strain despite good insurance. For a single mother facing that mountain alone, Karim couldn't imagine. "I keep thinking," he said slowly, "about how Layla volunteers at that same hospital. Maybe she's seen them. Maybe she could find out if they need more help." Fatima shook her head gently. "You know she can't share patient information." and it might seem intrusive. She started gathering their now empty bowls. Sometimes we just have to trust that our small actions ripple outward in ways we can't see or control. Karim helped clear the table, his mind still circling the problem. It just feels unfinished somehow. Not every story gets a neat ending, Fatima replied, running water into the sink. Some kindnesses are just moments that pass, and we never know their full effect. Later, after the kitchen was clean, and they had settled in the living room with cups of mint tea, Karim found himself drowsing lightly in his favorite chair. The day's work, the countless passengers, the traffic, the weather had taken its toll. But it was the mother and Ali who drifted through his thoughts as he hovered on the edge of sleep. He wondered where they were from originally, what had brought them to this city, whether they had family somewhere who couldn't be with them during this difficult time. He wondered what Ali wanted to be when he grew up, whether he liked cars or dinosaurs or space, whether he was falling behind in school because of his illness. So many questions that would likely remain unanswered. In a city of millions, the chances of their paths crossing again were slim. By tomorrow, he'd be back on the road, picking up new passengers, hearing new stories, navigating the endless flow of human lives that intersected briefly with his own. The sound of the front door opening roused him. Layla's voice called a greeting as she dropped her backpack by the door. "In here," Fatima called back. "Your father's almost asleep in his chair." "Not sleeping," Karim protested, sitting up straighter as his daughter entered the room. "Just resting my eyes." Layla grinned, flopping onto the couch beside her mother. "Sure, Baba. Whatever you say." Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail and she looked tired but animated. "You won't believe what we learned today about cardiac surgery techniques." As Layla launched into an enthusiastic explanation that Karim only partially understood, he found himself studying her face. The same age as he'd been when she was born, yet seemingly so much more focused and driven than he'd ever been. Her passion for medicine had always been clear, but seeing it blossom into genuine knowledge still amazed him. "And that's why I've decided to specialize in pediatrics," she was saying when Karim tuned back in. "The Children's Hospital program is accepting applications for summer internships, and Dr. Chen thinks I have a good chance." "The Children's Hospital," Karim repeated, the coincidence striking him. "I picked up a patient from there today, a little boy named Ali and his mother." Layla looked interested but shook her head. "I don't know them, but there are hundreds of patients and I'm only there on weekends." "Of course," Karim said, settling back in his chair. He hadn't really expected a connection, but some small part of him had hoped. That night, as he lay in bed beside Fatima's sleeping form, Karim found his thoughts returning once more to the mother and son. He hadn't left a receipt or his contact information. If the taxi company got a call asking about a driver who'd given a free ride, would they even know to direct the call to him? Probably not. The image of the small apartment with its wall of children's drawings stayed with him as he drifted toward sleep. So many people in this vast city, each carrying their own burdens. All he'd done was lighten one load for one brief moment. It would have to be enough. 2 days passed, and the memory of the young mother and her son began to fade beneath the steady stream of passengers that filled Karim's taxi. There was the businessman who'd forgotten his anniversary, desperately calling florists from the back seat. The tourist family arguing over which attraction to visit first. The old woman who needed help with her groceries up 3 flights of stairs, insisting on giving Karim a homemade cookie for his trouble. Life continued its normal rhythm. Morning prayers, breakfast with Fatima and Layla, then hours behind the wheel navigating the city's arteries, while the meter ticked away the dollars that would pay next month's bills. By Thursday afternoon, Karim was parked outside a popular restaurant, eating a quick lunch of falafel wrapped in pita bread. The early November air had turned chilly, and he kept the engine running for heat while he ate, scrolling through news headlines on his phone. His cell phone rang, an unknown number with the city's area code. Probably another customer calling directly, instead of using the dispatch service. He swallowed his bite quickly and answered. "Hello, this is Karim. Good afternoon," came a professional female voice. "Am I speaking with Karim Nasser, taxi driver with City Cab Company?" Something about the formal tone made Karim sit up straighter. "Yes, that's me." "Mr. Nasser, my name is Hannah Chen. I'm calling from Children's Memorial Hospital." She paused briefly. We've had someone trying very hard to reach you. Kareem's lunch suddenly felt heavy in his stomach. The children's hospital, his mind immediately went to the worst possibility. Had something happened to his nephew Sammy? But no, Sammy had been in remission for years now. Who's trying to reach me? He asked, his voice tighter than he intended. A mother, Nadia Rahal. She's been calling taxi companies across the city trying to locate, in her words, the kind taxi driver who drove her and her son home on Tuesday afternoon. The mother and the sick boy, Ali. Relief flooded through Kareem, followed immediately by concern. Is she all right? Is her son all right? The questions tumbled out before he could stop them. There was a smile in Hannah's voice when she answered. They're both fine now. Better than fine, actually. That's why she's been trying to find you. Kareem relaxed slightly, leaning back against the seat. I'm glad to hear it. How did you find me? She remembered your first name and that you mentioned your daughter volunteers here. We checked with our volunteer coordinator, found Layla Nasser on the roster and connected the dots. Your daughter gave us your number. That explained the missed call from Layla an hour ago that he hadn't had time to return. He made a mental note to call her back as soon as this conversation ended. Mrs. Rahal wants to speak with you, Hannah continued. She asked me to see if you'd be willing to come to the hospital sometime today. Ali is still admitted but doing well now. Still admitted? Kareem repeated, confused. I thought you said they were fine. Hannah hesitated. They are now. But there was a situation the night you drove them home. Mrs. Rahal can explain better than I can. Would you be able to visit today? Kareem glanced at his watch. It was just past 2 o'clock. The hospital was about 20 minutes away in current traffic. I could come around 4 when my shift ends. Would that work? That would be perfect. I'll let her know. 4th floor pediatric care unit. Just check in at the nurse's station when you arrive. After hanging up, Kareem sat for a long moment, his half-eaten lunch forgotten. What had happened that night after he'd dropped them off? A situation, the woman had said. That could mean anything. He tried calling Layla back, but the call went straight to voicemail. She was probably in class now. He left a brief message asking her to call him when she could, then started his car and pulled back into traffic. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of passengers and streets. Kareem went through the motions automatically, greeting, driving, making small talk, accepting payment, while his mind circled the same questions repeatedly. Why was the boy still in the hospital? What could have happened? And why did the mother want to see him? At 10 minutes to 4, Kareem found himself pulling into the hospital parking lot. He'd finished his last fare early and decided to head straight over, rather than trying to squeeze in one more pickup. The parking fee would eat into today's earnings, but he found he didn't care. The hospital's main entrance was busy with people coming and going, doctors in white coats walking purposefully, visitors with flowers and gift bags, patients being wheeled out to waiting cars. Kareem followed signs to the elevators, riding up with a young nurse who was balancing a tray of coffee cups. 4th floor, please, he said when she asked which button to press. Pediatrics, she nodded. Visiting someone? Sort of, Kareem replied, not knowing how else to explain his presence. The elevator doors opened onto a floor that tried its best not to look like a hospital. Colorful murals of forests and animals covered the walls. The nurse's station was decorated with paper snowflakes, an early nod to the winter holidays still weeks away. Kareem approached hesitantly. I'm Kareem Nasser. I was asked to come see Nadia Rahal and her son. The nurse at the desk looked up and smiled in recognition. Oh, you're the taxi driver. Her exclamation drew glances from her colleagues. We've heard about you. Mrs. Rahal is in room 412 with Ali. They're expecting you. Feeling oddly like a celebrity, Kareem made his way down the hallway, past rooms where small patients watched TV or played with toys despite IV lines and monitoring equipment. He found room 412 and knocked gently on the half-open door. Come in, called a familiar voice. Kareem stepped into the room and immediately recognized the woman sitting beside the hospital bed. Though she looked different today. Her hair was neatly combed, her clothes fresh, and though fatigue still showed on her face, there was a lightness to her that hadn't been there before. In the bed sat the boy, Ali, propped up on pillows. A cartoon played on the TV mounted to the wall, but he turned away from it as Kareem entered. Color had returned to his face and his eyes, dark and intelligent, widened with curiosity. "It's you," Nadia said, standing to greet him. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Of course," Karim replied, suddenly feeling awkward. "Is everything okay?" "They said there was a situation." Nadia gestured for him to sit in the chair opposite hers. "That's why I needed to find you. To thank you properly." Her voice caught slightly. "You saved my son's life." Karim blinked in confusion. "I just drove you home." "No." She shook her head firmly. "You did much more than that." She turned to her son. "Ali, this is Mr. Karim, the taxi driver I told you about." Ali studied him solemnly. "You didn't make my mom pay." Despite the serious atmosphere, Karim couldn't help smiling. "That's right." Nadia reached out impulsively and grasped Karim's hand. "Let me explain what happened. After you dropped us off, Ali rested while I made dinner. But about an hour later, he started running a high fever, 104 degrees, and became confused. These can be signs of infection, which is extremely dangerous for him because his immune system is weakened from his treatments." She took a deep breath. "I rushed him back to the hospital. The doctor said if I'd waited even 30 more minutes to bring him in, the infection could have spread to his bloodstream." "It was that close." Her eyes filled with tears. "If we'd had to wait for another taxi, or if I'd been counting my money to see if I could afford the ride home and the potential return trip." Karim felt a chill run through him as he understood. "You might have waited too long to bring him back," she nodded. "The doctor said it was a matter of minutes, not hours. They started antibiotics immediately, and by morning he was stable." She squeezed Karim's hand. "Your kindness that afternoon gave me the mental space to notice his symptoms quickly, and the resources to get him back here immediately." Ali, apparently tired of being talked about, chimed in. "Mom cried when she was telling the nurses about you." Nadia laughed softly, releasing Karim's hand to ruffle her son's hair. "I did. I've been calling taxi companies for 2 days trying to find you. I should have given you my card," Karim said, still processing everything he'd heard. "I just didn't think—" "It doesn't matter now," Nadia said. "What matters is we found you, and I can properly thank you." From her purse, she withdrew an envelope. "This is for the fare plus extra for your trouble." Karim shook his head. "Please, no. I don't want payment." "It's not payment," she insisted. "It's gratitude. And it would mean a lot to me if you would accept it." Before Karim could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it quickly. Layla saying she would be at the hospital in 10 minutes for her volunteer shift and asking if he was still there. "My daughter," he explained. "She volunteers here and she's on her way now." A thought struck him. "Would you like to meet her?" Ali perked up at the mention of a visitor, and Nadia smiled warmly. "We'd love to." As they waited for Layla to arrive, Karim found himself drawn into conversation with Ali, who, once his initial shyness faded, proved to be a talkative child with an encyclopedic knowledge of dinosaurs and a talent for drawing. The wall of artwork in their apartment suddenly made sense. Watching the boy's animated expressions as he described the differences between a Triceratops and a Styracosaurus, Karim felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude. This bright spark of life had nearly been extinguished, and some small action of his had helped keep it burning. His phone buzzed again. Layla was on her way up. And for the first time, Karim realized this story wasn't finished after all. A light knock on the door frame drew everyone's attention. Layla stood there in her volunteer uniform, a bright blue polo shirt with the hospital logo, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of her father sitting comfortably beside a patient's bed. "Baba, what's going on?" She entered the room cautiously, glancing between Karim and the others. Karim stood, feeling a strange mix of pride and excitement. "Layla, this is Nadia Rahal and her son, Ali. I drove them home from the hospital the other day." The simple explanation felt inadequate for the complex web of events that had brought them all together in this room. "Nice to meet you," Layla said with the practiced warmth of someone used to meeting new patients. She turned to Ali with a bright smile. "I like your dinosaur drawing." Ali beamed, holding up the sketch pad he'd been working on. "It's a Parasaurolophus. They had big crests on their heads like this." He pointed to the curved tube-like structure he'd drawn extending from the dinosaur's skull. "For making sounds," Layla nodded, surprising everyone, like a built-in trumpet. "My little cousin went through a dinosaur phase too." Ali looked impressed. Most grown-ups don't know that. I'm not quite a grown-up yet, Layla laughed. She turned to Nadia. I'm studying to be a pediatrician. That's why I volunteer here. Your father mentioned you volunteer, Nadia said warmly. He's very proud of you. A faint blush colored Layla's cheeks as she glanced at her father. I didn't know he talked about me to his passengers. Only the special ones. Kareem replied with a wink. As Layla and Ali fell into conversation about dinosaurs and hospital food, both agreeing the Jell-O was the only edible option, Kareem found himself studying Nadia. The worry lines around her eyes had softened since he'd first seen her, though the fundamental exhaustion of a caretaker remained. A thought that had been forming in the back of his mind suddenly crystallized. Do you work, Nadia? He asked when there was a natural pause in the conversation. I mean, outside of taking care of Ali? Something flickered across her face. Pride, perhaps, or defensiveness. I was an administrative assistant before Ali's diagnosis. I had to quit when his treatment started. Too many hospital stays, too many sick days. No employer could accommodate that schedule. She straightened slightly. Once he's better, I'll find something. Kareem nodded, choosing his next words carefully. My brother Rami owns a convenience store about 10 blocks from your apartment. He mentioned yesterday that he needs help with bookkeeping and inventory management. The hours would be flexible and... He hesitated, not wanting to overstep. He would understand about hospital visits. Nadia stared at him, clearly caught off guard. You're offering me a job? You barely know me. Rami needs help from someone trustworthy and organized. I'm good at reading people. You have to be in my line of work, and you strike me as both. Kareem shrugged as if it were the most natural suggestion in the world. The store is close to your home. The hours can work around Ali's treatments, and the pay is decent. But of course, it's entirely up to you. The room fell quiet. Even Ali and Layla had stopped talking to listen. Nadia's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. Kareem considered the question seriously. Because when we help each other, the world makes more sense. It was something his father had often said. A simple philosophy that had guided much of Kareem's life. Ali, sensing the emotional weight in the room, piped up. Mom needs a job because Dad isn't with us anymore. Nadia touched her son's hand gently. Ali, it's okay, the boy insisted. Dad had to go away and now it's just us. But we're doing good, right, Mom? Nadia nodded, swallowing hard. We're doing good. She looked back at Kareem. My husband died 18 months ago. Cancer, different from Ali's, but still, sometimes it feels like too much bad luck for one family. I'm so sorry, Kareem said, the words inadequate but sincere. Layla, showing a maturity beyond her years, smoothly redirected the conversation. Ali, did you know Mr. Rami's store has the best selection of comic books in the neighborhood? My dad used to take me there when I was your age. Ali's eyes lit up. Really? I love comics. As the child's excitement lifted the mood, Nadia reached for the envelope again and pressed it into Kareem's hand. Please, she said quietly. Accept this. Not for the ride, but because it matters to me. This time, seeing the determination in her eyes, Kareem nodded. Thank you. And, she added with newfound confidence, I would very much like to speak with your brother about the job. Later, as visiting hours ended and Kareem and Layla prepared to leave, Ali called out from his bed. Will you come back? Both of you? Kareem looked to Nadia, who smiled and nodded. We'd like that, she said. Walking through the hospital parking lot toward their separate cars, Layla linked her arm through her father's. You never told us about them. About what happened. It didn't seem important at the time, Kareem replied. Just another fare. Layla nudged him gently with her shoulder. It was never just another fare to you, Baba. That's why people remember you. As he drove home through the early evening traffic, Kareem found himself smiling. The envelope Nadia had given him contained exactly $22.50, the original fare amount. No more, no less. It was a statement, he realized. A restoration of balance, not charity. The weeks that followed brought changes to many lives. Nadia started working part-time at Rami's store while Ali continued his treatments. The flexible schedule allowed her to be at every doctor's appointment, every procedure. Rami, initially skeptical of hiring someone as a favor to his brother, soon came to value Nadia's meticulous attention to detail and quiet efficiency. Ali was released from the hospital after another week. His treatments continued as an outpatient, and slowly, The color returned to his cheeks, the energy to his movements. On days when Nadia worked and Ali felt strong enough, he would sometimes sit in the store's back office, reading comics or drawing elaborate dinosaur battles that Rami proudly displayed behind the counter. Fatima took to preparing extra food on weekends, sending Karim to deliver containers of homemade soup and bread to Nadia's apartment. Layla would occasionally accompany her father on these visits, bringing books on dinosaurs from the university library for Ali. What had begun as a chance encounter, a brief intersection of lives, gradually wove itself into something stronger, something like family. 1 year later, Karim found himself sitting in Nadia's apartment, now brighter with new curtains and freshly painted walls, a slice of birthday cake on the plate before him. Around the small living room sat a mixture of hospital staff, neighborhood friends, and Karim's own family. 7-year-old Ali, wearing a party hat shaped like a dinosaur head, was showing Rami's children how to play a new board game in the corner. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Nadia said, sliding into the chair beside Karim. She looked different now, still tired as all working mothers are, but with a steadiness that hadn't been there before. "How are the latest test results?" Karim asked, having learned over the months that direct questions about Ali's health were welcome, that pretending not to notice or care would have been a greater unkindness. Nadia's face broke into a genuine smile. "Better than expected. Dr. Patel says if this continues, we can reduce the frequency of treatments next month." She looked across the room at her son, laughing with his friends. "There were days I couldn't imagine this. A normal birthday party, friends, plans for the future." "You made it happen," Karim said sincerely. "Your strength, not my taxi ride," she shook her head. "We all need help sometimes. The trick is being willing to accept it when it comes, I think." From across the room, Ali called out, "Mom, Karim, come see what I got from Layla." As they joined the children crowded around a detailed model of a dinosaur skeleton, Karim felt a profound sense of rightness. The city continued to move around them, millions of lives brushing past each other every day. Most of these encounters remained just that, brief moments of proximity without connection. But sometimes, if you were lucky, if you were paying attention, these random intersections became something else entirely. Sometimes a simple decision, to give a free ride, to make a phone call, to offer a job, could alter the course of multiple lives. "Make a wish," Nadia told Ali as she prepared to light the candles on his cake again for the official ceremony. The boy took a deep breath, looked around at the gathered faces and smiled. Whatever he wished for when he blew out those candles remained his secret. But Karim had a feeling, watching the joy on that once pale face, that at least some of Ali's wishes had already come true.